Hello, this is Kim Ki-won from Richgo. Recently, the real estate measures were announced on August 8th. In fact, the real estate measures announced on August 8th are somewhat supply-oriented, but this supply cannot be realized immediately. Therefore, because it takes time, it is really not easy to control the currently heated real estate market with just these policies. I mentioned this before, but it seems that the government has finally started a policy today that can control the crazy housing prices in Seoul. To mention a specific point first, only in the metropolitan area, the virtual interest rate stress DSR will be implemented starting from September for the second phase. So, a virtual interest rate of 0.75% was supposed to be applied, but they are planning to raise it to 1.2%. Only for the metropolitan area. It is now expected that the loan limits for purchasing a house in the metropolitan area will be further reduced. Let's take a closer look at the details. This is an article that came out on August 20th. Therefore, they are planning to set the DSR stress rate for mortgage loans in the metropolitan area at 1.2%. And starting from September 1, the second phase of the stress debt service ratio, DSR, will finally be implemented. We are currently discussing this. Household debt has increased significantly. Therefore, it is now necessary for the banking sector and the government to work together proactively to manage this issue with a sense of urgency. He mentioned this. The stress DSR refers to the debt service ratio. It manages the total repayment amount that I can pay off from my salary through credit loans or mortgage loans. That's the DSR. And when this is done, a certain level of virtual interest rate is imposed to adjust the loan limits. So starting from September 1, this will include banks, mortgage loans, and then credit loans as well. In the first phase, credit loans were not included. Moreover, what else is included is that this financial sector also encompasses mortgage loans. And how is this financial sector? Although interest rates are high, they had previously allowed for higher limits on mortgage loans. But now, this is also being applied. And what's even more surprising here is, how is this stress interest rate determined? The lower limit is 1.5%. What is the upper limit? The upper limit is 3%. The stress interest rate can rise up to 3%. However, right now it is at 1.5%. So, how is this going to be reflected? In the first phase at 1.5%, 25% will be implemented. In the second phase, 50%, and in the third phase, 100%. So, originally, until September, it was 50%, which means, what is 50% of 1.5%? It's 0.75%. Therefore, with the virtual interest rate set at 0.75%, the loan limits are now being determined. So, what are they going to do about the metropolitan area? They are saying they will raise it to 1.2%, not just 0.75%. And perhaps here, as you can see, the stress virtual interest rate is capped at 3%. If the virtual interest rate is applied at 100% in the third stage of the 100% stress DSR at this top level of 3%, what does that mean? The virtual interest rate could increase to as much as 3%. So what happens then? It means that the loan limits could be significantly reduced. This can have a direct impact. The special housing loan and newborn special loan, along with increasing the gift tax exemption limit during marriage, encourage individuals with some assets to give their children amounts ranging from 150 million to as much as 250 million won, with almost no gift tax burden, urging them to use this for purchasing a home. Therefore, this will trigger immediate effects. The real estate measures announced on August 8 are focused on supply, and it's hard to have an immediate impact on the market with just that. So, I mentioned that it wouldn't be easy to control the rapidly heating real estate market with this, but applying a virtual interest rate of 1.2%, specifically for the metropolitan area, seems to be a measure that will immediately activate some level of restraint policy. So, although it is a bit late now, I am truly relieved that a real estate suppression policy that can have a direct impact on the market has finally been introduced. Additionally, there is something else I would like to discuss. What that means is that many people misunderstand. I am absolutely not a proponent of a decline, as Kim Ki-won. How could a bear advocate have invested in apartments and create such a real estate platform company? This is not a business that costs just a few pennies. What I want is a proper increase in real estate. What would be the best scenario? A steady increase in housing prices at the level of inflation is the best scenario. It benefits the economy, individuals and businesses, and it would also be good for the government, as tax revenues would increase. However, I keep mentioning that the current situation is risky, particularly focusing on the metropolitan area. Excessive housing price increases have a tremendous negative impact on the economy, which is why I am bringing this up. We end up experiencing a rise in real estate prices that exceeds what is affordable, don't we? So, what should a significant portion of income be spent on? It should be spent on housing costs. Whether it's using a loan for a John's long-term lease, paying monthly rent, or taking out a mortgage loan to buy my own home, if housing prices rise too much, this will mean that a larger portion of my total income will have to be allocated to these costs, and this burden will continue to grow. So, what happens then? What about the remaining part of my income? That part decreases, right? If it decreases, what happens? Life becomes tougher, doesn't it? I will reduce the number of times I eat out from 2 or 3 times to once, and I will cut down on the number of items I buy from 3 or 4 times to 2. In this situation, if people don't get married and don't have children, what happens? Are companies generating sales? It won't be easy for companies to increase their sales. And what about small business owners? It is becoming increasingly difficult to make a living, and when businesses struggle and small merchants face difficulties, what happens next? The economic situation of individuals will worsen. What happens when individuals' economic situation worsens? The government deteriorates. Why? Because the government does not receive tax revenue. In the end, what does this lead to? It means that a situation where all economic agents are struggling is inevitable. Therefore, the excessive rise in real estate prices beyond what you can afford must be approached with extreme caution. Now, let me show you with data just how excessive the housing prices in Seoul are. This is what is called the Housing Purchase Burden Index. The historical average is 266. During the COVID-19 pandemic, housing prices in Seoul hit 400. Insane, right? Now that there has been a rebound, even though the interest rates for mortgage loans have been somewhat adjusted, they are still high. It's 341. How much is this? It's higher than before the interest rate crisis. And even during the crisis, it's much higher. What does that mean for you? Housing prices have risen excessively. This is why our lives are tough. Ultimately, what does this lead to? Individuals are struggling, businesses are struggling, and the government is also facing difficulties. Therefore, excessive housing price increases must never occur. And that is why I keep talking about risks and stating that it is dangerous. I tried to illustrate this with a metaphor using ChatGPT. Look at this. The upper body is incredibly large, right? The upper body is incredibly large, but what about the lower body? It's quite weak, right? How does it look to you all? Running like this, one might even fall over, right? I believe this is exactly what the current real estate market in Seoul, South Korea, looks like. Why? Because housing prices have risen excessively, so the upper part is just being pumped up tremendously right now. As a result, due to excessive housing prices, all economic agents have become unstable. The foundation is currently very weak. So, what happens then? Ultimately, it is bound to collapse. When it collapses, what does that mean? It means that each economic entity will have to pay an enormous price. When excessive housing price increases occur, the possibility of a significant drop also becomes greater. A gradual decline is acceptable. But what happens if there is an excessive crash in a short period? You all saw the second half of 2020, right? Countless real estate-related companies have gone bankrupt, and many more continue to fail even now, right? The number of auction properties continues to increase, and the lives of those who bought during the peak are becoming even more difficult. This is why I am saying that excessive housing price increases should not happen. I would like to say something to those who talk about rising real estate prices. Regardless of whether your incentives are at stake or for any other reason, you keep saying that real estate prices will continue to rise. Let me ask you this. Think about it and place your hand on your heart. The real estate prices are already excessively high. What will happen if they continue to rise from here? Isn't it going to be a serious problem? Please take these aspects into consideration and provide balanced broadcasts and information delivery. Isn't that the role that those who call themselves experts and real estate YouTubers should fulfill? Therefore, today I want to commend the government for introducing policies that can appropriately suppress demand, preventing excessive increases in the real estate market from continuing any further. It is truly important for the government to remember that a gradual increase in housing prices in line with inflation is preferable, and that excessive increases are not beneficial for anyone. I urge you to consider these aspects when implementing supply policies and various financial policies. Thank you.